Did you know that your running zones are unique to you? That everyone's running zones are different and these prescriptions of specific max heart rate percents are only kind of estimates and might not actually perfectly align with your fitness? Have you ever wondered how to figure out your specific running zones and actually how to calculate that based off your fitness level without an expensive or fancy lab test like you might do in a lab with a physiologist like me? Today, I'm going to tell you exactly how we test zones with my clients and give you my free zones calculator that you can use here today by clicking the link here to calculate and figure out your unique running zones. Hello there and welcome back to my channel. If you're new, I'm Dr. Alyssa Olenick. I have a PhD in exercise physiology, and it seems like I am the zones whisperer nowadays. There's so much confusion around zones out there, and it seems like there's these magical percentages that we should all be targeting. But the reality is that your underlying fitness status impacts your zones and changes where they might fall, especially things like zones 2, 3, and then 4 and plus. Why is that? Because you have these physiological thresholds that determine where these zones lie and fall for you. As a quick recap, if you have a 5-zone model of zones 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, your first zone 1 and zone 2 reflect your aerobic fitness, and they typically fall below something known as your first ventilatory threshold and or a point at which lactate, a molecule that comes when there's less oxygen available as an energy metabolite, starts to gradually accumulate in the blood, but not rapidly yet. This is a point at which your breathing might start to rapidly increase, or you might not be able to talk as consistently while running if you were to do so. People with a lower fitness status have a shorter zone 2. It's narrower and they hop out of it really quickly, which it might be at a lower heart rate because of that. But people with a higher fitness status will have a wider zone 2, because people with a wider fitness status will have a higher lactate threshold. When we think about the next zone, zone 3 into zone 4, the point and threshold that separates those two from each other is known as your second ventilatory threshold or your lactate threshold. Now, these are physiological markers that can be indirectly assessed with heart rate, which is why we use heart rate as a way to calculate and assess this. People with a higher lactate threshold are better at both using oxygen for energy metabolism during exercise so they can keep going at a higher work rate while sustaining that power output and activity, and clearing out lactate or not having it accumulate as quickly so they don't feel that burn and fatigue and slowing down, which isn't necessarily caused by lactate itself. That's a conversation for another day. But they aren't able to sustain that power output and or work as hard or run as fast without having to slow down or stop so oxygen become more readily available. Therefore, people who are more fit, their lactate threshold is at a higher percent of their max heart rate or a higher percent of their VO2 max. Therefore, their zone 2 is a lot wider, and they can exercise at a faster effort and rate and or a higher percent of their heart rate while still staying in that zone 2. These markers then reflect and affect where we reach our threshold zone, which is that crossover between zone 3 and zone 4, and even our zone 4 to zone 5, and so on and so forth, our maximal heart rate. As you can see, somebody who has a lower aerobic fitness status might have that traditional zone 2 of 60 to 70%. But somebody who's more fit or has a higher lactate threshold or just a higher aerobically fit individual, they might be able to exercise upwards of 75, 80, 85, or even higher for elites of their percent max heart rate and still be in a place where they're in their zone 2 or zone 3, clearing the lactate and or using oxygen more readily without hopping into those high heart rates and zones. So that's why it's important to figure out what zone works for you. Now that I'm done with my science lesson, let me break down for you how to figure this out and test it with our approach inside the LIST method. Now, if you're going to do this, I really encourage you to use a heart rate monitor strap that goes underneath your chest, right below your heart, as that will be the most accurate if you have that available. Otherwise, using the arm bands are perfectly fine. Substitute if you prefer that as well. Obviously, a chest strap will always be the most accurate. And if you only have a regular running watch that picks up your heart rate like this, that's fine, but just know that your heart rates might not always be perfectly accurately reflective of what they actually are and might be different from this to maybe a chest strap and in between. Whatever tool you're using, you just need something that simply is going to assess your heart rate and figuring that out from there. Next, I want you to identify if you were a beginner runner or somebody who's able to actually complete this test and get good data. Here's the deal. If you're a beginner runner or a newer runner and or a less experienced runner who can't comfortably and or confidently run for 30 to 60 minutes at a time, your data might not be as good with this test as someone who has a better aerobic fitness status or more running experience. The reason being that your heart rate is going to jump so high during the test that it might artificially look like you are more fit or have a higher fitness status or a higher threshold heart rate than you actually do. If that's the case and scenario for you, that doesn't mean you can't do this test, but I caution you to use the heart rates that are given to you from this and stick to something like RPE, your paces, and or your relative efforts until you start to gain more fitness. But if you have some running experience, you've been doing this for a while, you can comfortably and confidently run 60 minutes pretty hard in a period of time, you're gonna get more accurate results from this test, and I'm gonna break down for you how to do this. So a threshold test is essentially an indirect, non-invasive lab way of measuring your threshold effort, or that crossover between zone 3 and zone 4, in a regular run setting that you can extrapolate over to figure out your zones and your heart rate. The reason you want to test your heart rate during this test is because you're going to use that to then indirectly figure out your zones that will be calculated in my free calculator, again, linked here, that will then tell you what your zones are relative to this. You don't need to worry about the math and percentages that go into this because I do it for you. To do this test, you will warm up for 10 minutes, very easy running, maybe some striders, just regular running warm up to make sure you're prepared for this test. Then for 60 minutes, and I know that seems like a really long time, you want to do a maximal all-out run for distance and effort during that time. You don't want to think about your efforts going like this and zigzagging, or your heart rate zigzagging like this during your time. You really want to think about getting to a point where you have a plateau of effort, heart rate, pace, and intensity across that 60 minutes. Think about something like a 10K race that you might be doing would be a great way to test this if you would rather do this in a race setting or want to mimic this on your own. The reason we want that is that 60-minute effort, or roughly 10K effort for many of you watching this video, is going to give you a threshold heart rate. That's roughly about the exercise that you can sustain for 60 minutes at that max effort. That indirectly identifies that crossover point between your upper zone 3 and your lower zone 4 threshold, or your second ventilatory threshold. From there, you will plug that number, the average of that number across that plateau of time, assuming you have a steady heart rate, pace, distance, into my calculator. Then from there, it will extrapolate for you your zones for paces and heart rate based off that effort that you performed in that test here today. Now, if you do not want to perform a 60-minute test, I also have a 30-minute option. While the 30-minute option can work, we are having to make more guesses and estimates based off your 30-minute effort pace, what your threshold pace and effort might be based upon that, and that heart rate. This is a great option for people who are maybe not able to run 30 minutes yet and want to do the 30-minute test as a baseline measurement of where their fitness is, knowing that the heart rate might be over-exaggerated for them, but just to see how their pace versus effort versus distance in that 30-minute training changes over time. For something like that, instead of using the heart rate from your watch, I would use your heart rate from your watch to look at trends of improvement over time, but use something like heart rate reserve calculated inside of my calculator as well. Instead, in the meantime, mixed with RPE, rating of perceived exertion, and just focusing on becoming a better runner. I don't want to deter you guys from calculating your zones this way, but I don't want you to think that if you have 180 beats per minute threshold heart rate and you plug it in, you think, oh, I'm a super freak fitness person, elite athlete, marathoner, when really it just might be an artificial increase simply just due to your baseline response to running at this time. But for those of you that do have some baseline training, fitness, and experience, it's a great way to figure out where that threshold heart rate is to you relative to your fitness level, which then allow you to figure out those zones reflective of you. Because for many of you who have a moderate to higher or more advanced fitness status, your zones are going to be shifted forward. So therefore, those indirect calculations of, say, zone 2 being 60 to 70% might not be true to you, and or estimates or guesses of your max heart rate might also not be true for you and your max heart rate as well. So once you're done with that test, you can plug that information into the calculator and get an idea not just of your heart rate zones, but estimate paces. This is great as well because if you were doing a program that prescribes speed work based off specific paces, race pace estimates, or similar things like that, you have an idea of what your estimate 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, threshold, and tempo paces may be. Now, are these perfectly reflected of those race paces all the time? Not necessarily. But they can give you an idea of where your paces and efforts versus your heart rate relative to your own physiology lie, and give you targets and or areas to aim for within your physiology and data, and or to train in a way that's driving you either above that lactate threshold or below it intentionally within your training. So if you're gonna give this a try, let me know below how it goes for you. Let me know if you shocked yourself with what your zones are, or if you kind of had to have the tough talk with yourself that you're not quite ready to use zones, and that's okay. You're gonna continue to work on being a better runner and improving your fitness, and just using heart rate and heart rate reserve as a method right now as a way to gauge your progress over time. For my more fit individuals, did you realize that your zone 2 might actually be better than you think it is? It's always surprising to me as well. If you're looking for a program that specifically uses threshold testing as baseline going into every single program, as well as along the way to make sure that you are improving and adjusting based on every program that you do, or as your fitness improves, and then uses that data to specifically program you workouts based off your heart rate, paces, fitness level, or effort inside of it based off the goals that you have to either get you faster, build your aerobic base, or become simply a stronger and better runner, look no further than us at the LIST method. Inside, we have over 30 running programs from the absolute beginner all the way to the intermediate or advanced runner, spanning from 5K, marathons, ultramarathons, and every distance in between. We use threshold testing specifically in our more experienced runners and athletes, people who have some sort of baseline running experience. So that way you don't feel pressured to execute these types of tests as a beginner. We focus on just getting you better at running first before putting you under something as strenuous as this. This is just one example of the science that we use to inform our programming and data inside of our program that allows you to intentionally get better and faster with us and every single program and every single training cycle that we use. So if you're looking for a more intelligent-based running program that actually uses science to inform what you're doing, I'm going to link our programs and quizzes here. Otherwise, you can email us at any time at hello@thelistmethod.com to chat with a coach to see what program might be right for you or help you build out a timeline of our programs to get you to your goal race or your fitness goal that you're trying to achieve with your running. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.